Hey, Diana, did you know that doing the same thing over and over again can make you money?
Marc, that's the dumbest thing I've ever heard.
Ladies and gentlemen, jurists and just curious, welcome to the Successful Barrister Podcast. Here you'll learn about marketing, management, and life skills for lawyers that probably won't get you disbarred. Hosted by Marc Whitehead, a seasoned lawyer who remembers when fax machines were cutting edge, and Diana Berry, attorney, COO, and the brains behind the scenes. Together, they are the legal world's most dynamic duo since statutes met regulations. So if you're looking to build a practice, not a prison, you're in the right place. Welcome to the Successful Barrister, where legal legends are made.
All right, here we go. We're going to start the podcast for the Successful Barrister Marketing, Management, and Life Skills for Lawyers that probably won't get you disbarred. I'm Marc Whitehead, here along with my co-host, Diana Berry.
Hi.
Hey, how you doing?
Good. Happy Halloween.
Happy Halloween. We are sitting here on October 31st, and we're sitting here looking at each other, and we're trying to lie and say we're in costume when really we forgot today was Halloween and just showed up in whatever.
So I intentionally chose orange today.
I'm dressed up as a drugstore cowboy.
No.
And you are dressed up as?
Oh, I wore the theme colors.
The theme
I'm in
colors.
orange and
Okay,
black.
so you're in orange and black. Okay, all right. That's pretty
I do
close.
have a pig ears headband that I took off for recording purposes.
Okay.
You're welcome.
And with us, our producer's Goose, who's laying down in her dog bed, snoozing, and our other producer, what's our other producer's name?
Super disrespectful. Her name is Pepper.
Okay, Pepper. Sorry, Pepper. Pepper's dressed up really cute. She's dressed up as
Joy from
Joy
Inside Out 2.
From Inside Out 2. All right. All right. With that, let's talk about what we're going to talk about today. So last couple of episodes ago, we talked about strategy, and basically strategy is making good choices. What you tell your teenagers every day when they walk out the door, make good choices. So today we're going to expound upon the idea of choices a little bit, and we're going to move into how your choices can lead to good habits. Because it is a choice to develop a habit. Habits don't just happen naturally, at least not the really good ones that are really productive. Those are choices that you make to establish some good habits. Well, it leads me back to an article that I wrote in the Successful Barrister Newsletter, the printed version, which all of you can subscribe. But I wrote an article, The 7 Habits of Highly Successful Lawyers. Obviously, stolen and ripped off from Stephen Covey's book, The 7 Habits of Highly Successful People. With that framework in mind, I had written an article a while back on the 7 Habits of Highly Successful Lawyers as related to Stephen Covey's book. A great book. It's been out forever. I think probably 30, 40 years.
Yep.
Foundational. It's a foundational book. It's one of the very first business books when business books really started taking off, 30, 40 years ago. And it is very foundational. But shockingly, we've never covered it on this podcast. So I thought we might.
Not today.
Thought we might talk about that in the context of choices again. I'm a big believer. People are made up of their atoms and their choices.
I really like that. So just obviously habits are important, but why do you think, as a lawyer, as an entrepreneur, successful both, why are habits so important?
Well, habits are things that you can build on, and you can start slowly. You can start slowly with a habit of, say, making, at least one marketing contact a week. You do that every week. That's 52 marketing contacts a year, and that builds on itself. Well, all right, let's build on a habit. Let's do 2 a week. Let's do 3 a week. And then start looking at how those habits over the long run can really start to get your momentum going. And to me, habits kind of basically lead naturally to momentum. And momentum is what pushes you forward. We talked about the flywheel in the past. The flywheel is basically a circular concept of, how to run your business. You start from the top, which is marketing, and then you have conversion into cases, and then you have operations, and then you come back around to the top of the flywheel, which is you do good work, your clients love you, and they refer you more business, and that flywheel starts to go. The momentum starts to build. And the flywheel is a perfect example of habits, developing good, consistent habits in how you run your business, and how over time the momentum just grows and grows and grows and grows.
I like that. And so this episode, we're going to talk about the 7 habits you identified for that would be particularly effective for lawyers, right?
Right.
So do you want to just introduce the 7?
Well,
and then we
the
can
7
go into them in depth.
Well, the 7 habits, are pretty much outlined the way Stephen Covey outlined it, but basically how it kind of applied to me over my 30-some years of experience in developing, systems, processes, a business, marketing, all of these things that you have to do in a business. Tell you what we'll do is let's come back and introduce the 7 habits after the break.
Perfect.
And then I think we talked about, do we want to talk about all the habits or we want to just pick a few? And I kind of have leaned in the direction that we just ought to talk about all of them.
All right.
So maybe we'll split them up, maybe do 3 or 4 in segment number 2, and then come back in segment number 3 and finish up. So I think that may be the outline that we're going to follow today. So with that, we'll be right back.
This podcast is sponsored by Marc Whitehead and Associates, a national disability benefits law firm. Marc Whitehead runs a firm of over 60 dedicated people whose mission is to make a difference in the lives of our injured and disabled clients. Marc represents disabled claimants in Social Security disability, private disability insurance, and veterans disability claims in all 50 states. Marc Whitehead is double board certified in both Social Security disability law and personal injury trial law. Marc has litigated disability cases in over 40 states and counting and can help your clients too. Stop throwing your phone calls away. Call Marc Whitehead at 701-VIP-LEAD. That's 701-VIP-LEAD. Or visit our website at disabilitydenials.com. Referral fees are paid in all jurisdictions where it is permitted. Refer us your disability cases today and know that your clients will be in good hands.
And we're back. So we're going to talk this section about the 7 habits of highly successful lawyers. And I'll rattle them off real quickly, and then we'll go through them kind of one by one. So we'll kind of see how I think they've applied to my career. And I want to hear how you think they've applied to you as well.
Put me on the spot.
I know I'm putting you on the spot. So the way Stephen Covey outlined it, he came up with 7 habits. Number 1, be proactive. Number 2, begin with the end in mind. Number 3, put first things first. Number 4, think win-win. Number 5, seek to understand, then be understood. Make sure you get it in the right order. Habit 6, synergize. And number 7, sharpen the saw. So starting with the first habit, being proactive. I can honestly say that probably the first half of my career, I probably was not very proactive. I probably let things come to me. I kind of let circumstances dictate, how my practice and how my career would go. And as I've said in the past on this podcast, if I knew then what I know now, my yacht would be 127 feet instead of just 27 feet. But it's okay. You got to start sooner or later. But being proactive, when somebody first starts their law practice, when you hang out your shingle, typically you handle what's called threshold law, which is you will handle anything that crosses your threshold, regardless of what comes in the door. You'll handle criminal work. You'll handle bankruptcy work. We did various types of business work, just literally anybody that would write me a check or sign on the dotted line. It's what we did. And you do that out of necessity. You got to pay the bills. But it wasn't until I started thinking about in terms of what to cut. I need to stop doing certain things because it's taken away from doing more productive things. So the first thing is I used to be friends with a criminal judge, and criminal judges in Houston, Texas, and Harris County, Texas, at least back in the day. There was no public defender's office. All indigent defendants were defended by court-appointed attorneys, and you got what's called a day rate, which back then was only $200 a day to represent these people. And so I would get appointed all the time to represent it, and I would take that work. The problem is it took up all my time for $200 a day. Now, it was cash. It was coming in the door, and I appreciated the work at the time. But I had to realize that this was taking away from my ability to do other things, to do, to be more proactive in areas where I could actually make, a reasonable wage. So that was my first thing of being proactive. I had to fire the judge.
Fire the steady stream of income.
Yes, I had to get rid of the steady stream of income. So I had the time to be more proactive in developing what ultimately was, my personal injury practice. And I had to start finding ways of actually getting that business. I had to go out and start hustling, which takes time, which means you have to create the time. You have to be proactive in thinking about ways to free your time to actually go out and hustle.
Yeah, so I think when I saw that today, I was kind of smirched because the words proactive are probably overused by me these days because we're adjusting our KPIs with our team. And I keep focusing on the word proactive. And so that's how I've used this particular habit in my job. It's really probably overused right now.
Well, in being proactive means thinking. It means putting on your thinking cap and thinking ahead of time, not being reactive to what happens to you every day.
And it's prioritizing the things I think that really move the needle. And so for our team, our case management software allows us to track clients that we haven't spoken to in a while. And a number of pass-through tasks. So it brings visibility to data that later on could signify a problem if unmitigated. And so it being proactive about those things that could lead to a problem allows us to, I think, also take control of our individual dockets, our case manager dockets. We've talked a lot about mental health with attorneys and in the legal field on this podcast. And I think the reactive nature, I've said this before, the reactive nature of the legal field is one of the reasons why I think we burn out a lot. It's the reasons why people are dissatisfied. It's the reason why you chose to leave, I think, PI work in some form or fashion, right? We could say that the trial calendar was the reason, you were always reacting to that. And so this particular practice of law, you found a way to be proactive overall.
I want to make this one point. I love how when I started talking about being proactive, I started talking about big picture things. And when you started talking about proactive stuff, you went straight to operations. Which is exactly why I hired you.
I was just gonna say, isn't that what you want from
because
your chief operations officer?
You're always thinking about operations, and I'm always thinking about sort of a global, big picture. Where do we go?
This is why this works.
This is why this relationship works. Is we're always thinking about it on slightly different levels, and that way we have all the levels covered. So.
Exactly. What's your second habit?
Begin with the end in mind. Now, this is one that I sort of started learning early on in my trial practice because one of the best little tips that I got when I started trying lawsuits was always start with a jury charge. In other words, before you even file your case, draft up, your jury charge. What is it what is the actual question that is going to be asked of the jury at the end of your case to determine whether or not you win or lose? What does that jury charge look like? In other words, begin with the end in mind, and then work backwards to develop your case from there. So are you going to get a comparative negligence charge, or is it, are you going to get a sudden emergency instruction on a case like this? You have to think about what your jury charge looks like, and then you work backwards from that point. I wish I would have taken the next step with that a lot sooner. Like I would say, took me about 15 years of practice before I took the next step in beginning with the end in mind, which is what we do now, which is every year. Like we're in October 31st, about to be November. We're about to start our planning process for 2025. And the way I like to do it, which was taught to me by Atticus, was you envision yourself 12 months from now. So we envision ourselves being December 2025. What are the good things as we look back on the year 2025, that the good things that happened, the things that went right, the things that went well? In other words, we're envisioning the future, and then we're going to reverse engineer it back here at the end of 2024. And that's how we're going to plan for the future.
Yeah, but I always think about it. How else are you going to know you're successful? How else are you going to know whether or not you did what you thought you were going to do if you don't know where you want to end up?
Right.
Right. So,
And you can do this at several levels. So we also do this with the Migrate Life exercise, which is
that's an Atticus tool.
another Atticus tool. And you start by envisioning the end. What do you want what do you want people to say at your eulogy? What do you want?
It's not as macabre as you make it sound.
Right. It's not that bad, but
What's your legacy?
What is your lifetime legacy?
Yeah.
And my legacy is I want to be known as a great husband, a great father, a great lawyer, a great businessman, and a great friend. That's my lifetime legacy. That's what I want to be known for.
I like it.
So I start with that in mind, and then I work backwards from there. So what are my 10-year goals? And all my kids launched into the world successfully. What are my 5-year goals? In 5 years I want, to double the size of this law firm. What are my 3-year goals? What are my 1-year goals, my 90-day goals, and so forth. So in other words, beginning with an end, you could have multiple end points. When we do our 1-year planning, the end is in 1 year from now. When we do our 3-year planning, it's in 3, and so forth and so forth. But beginning with the end in mind helps you reverse engineer and get you where you want to be.
The way I apply this one, again, you're unsurprised. Now I'm just going to look for operations reasons.
You're going strictly for operations, and I'm all for you. I'm rooting for you.
So I actually, people, our producer's going to laugh. I start every meeting with the purpose of this meeting is. I want to make sure that everyone's there that A, can contribute to the purpose of the meeting, but B, that where everyone knows we're not going to talk about, if we're talking about let's establish the process, we're not going to talk about ways we can improve the process. I just need to, we're establishing, we're going to make sure that everyone's doing what we thought they were supposed to be doing. And then once we have that lined up, then we can talk about all the extra stuff. I mean, I talk about a parking lot where we can parking lot ideas that have nothing to do with this meeting, because I want to be very clear. The purpose of this meeting is by the end of this meeting, you will know exactly what we set out to accomplish.
Right.
So, I mean, I like it.
So what we're really talking about is periodization. So
Yes.
What period constitutes the end? In your example, the end constitutes what's going to happen in the next
30 to
60 minutes.
Exactly.
At the end of 30 to 60 minutes, whatever your meeting is scheduled for, we're going to accomplish this objective. That's your end. Whereas if I'm doing a 90-day plan, that's the end. Or if I'm doing a 1-year plan, that's the end. Whatever the end is.
Know what that is.
Know what it is
Yeah.
when you're thinking about this, and then work backwards from there.
Yeah.
Reverse engineer. I love the term reverse engineering.
You use that one a
I
lot.
use that term almost every day.
We're not going to talk about, that's probably another episode though, how you want us to reverse engineer things as your team. What's your third habit?
Third habit, putting first things first. What that really means in my mind is focus. Focus management. So I have taught this class before, and originally it was called time management, teaching time management. I'm like, you can't teach time management because you can't manage your time, but you can manage what you focus on. In other words, how you use your time. And focus management is all about using people to the highest and best use of their abilities. So what should I, as the head of the law firm, be spending my time on? What's the best use of my time? And the corollary is stop doing things that aren't the best use of your time. What's the best use of your time as COO? What's the best use of my attorney's time? And again, every time you think about what's the best use, by definition, you're also eliminating things that don't fit into that category. In other words, things that either need to be dropped or delegated or deferred. What's the fourth D? I think that's the fourth. Deleted. I don't know how deleted and dropped are different, but whatever. We won't get into semantics here. But it's not only is focus management about figuring out the things you should be doing, it's figuring out the things you shouldn't be doing.
Absolutely. So I would love to talk about my planner, the full focus planner, but actually I want to talk about time blocking, because I feel like this is a good way that it was one of the first things you asked of me to do.
Right.
So what is time blocking, Mark? And how do you use it in the firm? And how do you ask your lawyers to do it to ensure that the first things, like that we're focusing on the important things?
The simple way that I ask everybody to do it in our firm is to set up your own personal Outlook calendar. We all have Outlook. It's our primary email.
So it's a whole separate,
system.
not the one that comes with your email address, but you want us to set up a whole new calendar, right?
It's a separate personal calendar that doesn't go onto the firm calendar. Okay. So you set up your own personal calendar, and it can be connected in various, I'm not going to get into the technical difficulties of it, but it works. But you set up your own personal Outlook calendar, and you block every part of your week. It may be blocked. I've got a hearing from this time. I have a telephone call. I have a meeting, whatever that looks like. But then you start blocking in what I call production time in there. I'm blocking out this afternoon 2 hours of production time, and I'm going to focus on this case this afternoon, or I'm going to focus on working on my accounting processes and procedures during this 2-hour block. Same thing. Block out time to exercise. I block out time to go have lunch. I know some people who meditate block out time. I'm going to meditate during this time. I'm not touchy-feely on do that, but I know it's... So in other words, you're not letting your week happen to you.
Exactly.
You are planning your week out.
And we talk about this particularly in terms of the whirlwind, right?
Right.
Because otherwise, like you just said, the calendar will happen to you. You've talked a lot about this with your team recently. The calendar's too full. So if you don't get ahead of your calendar and ahead of production time, somebody will put something on that calendar, even if you have something on top of it.
The biggest mistake here is that not blocking out your production time in advance, because people will drop things on your calendar because they see an opening and they'll take it. This has happened to me this afternoon. I thought I had a free afternoon. I forgot to block it.
Kidding.
Yes, boom. You thought you were going to be off this afternoon, and guess what happened?
I was technically off, but that's okay though. So, but what I think that happens, at least for what I've seen younger professionals, what happens when or busy, what happens to me is that you start a quarter and you have all these you do all the planning, and you think you're going to be here. You begin with the end in mind. You think you're going to be XYZ by the end of the quarter. But then if you don't actually put those goals into each week by time blocking, I think that's the simplest way to start. Then at the end of the quarter, you're going to find that you are in the exact same spot as where you began the quarter.
So when you look at your weekly plan, you should think of it in terms of, well, what are my 90-day goals? Or what's my 90-day plan? However you want to phrase that, which is a whole separate topic, but let's assume for the moment that most people try to plan per quarter. What can I do this week to advance what's on my 90-day plan? So you don't just randomly do it. So one of the key things is I like to make, when I do this on a regular basis, and I encourage my people to do it, make it pretty, like different types of...
different colors.
Different colors. Make it colorful. And then you print it out and you hang it on your door, or you give it to your accountability person, your staff assistant, or maybe maybe even give it to your boss. In the past, I've required that my lawyers send it to me. That's a habit that we've kind of gotten out of. We need to get back to that habit.
It was a good one.
Yeah. But I still see them posting it on their doors so their staff can know what their week is looking like. But the whole ideal is to do it and share it. Don't just keep it to yourself. It's not a secret. Share your week with whoever matters to you, whether it is somebody below you, somebody above you in the chain. Now, here's one thing I've noticed, that some of my staff would come to me and they would be disappointed because they consistently couldn't do everything that they had planned. And the way I explained it to them, they're like, hey, if you get 60, 70, 80% of what you had planned done, that's a win.
Absolutely.
That is absolutely a win. Nobody ever gets it perfect. Life still drops in and
Yeah, you really shouldn't, because you need to be a little bit adaptable, right, as the week happens, and responsive. You can't have such rigidity in your schedule that you shouldn't be able to, you should be able to respond.
That's what I love about doing the Outlook calendar. You can slide things. Things can slide. Things happen. Say something you got planned Friday afternoon, and maybe something broke on Monday and it kind of went away. All of a sudden, you slide it around and rearrange. It doesn't have to be static.
Yeah. And speaking of winning, what's your fourth goal or your fourth habit?
I think win-win. This kind of goes back to our last podcast when we were talking about having, a growth mindset versus a closed mindset. In a closed mindset, people think win-lose. If I win, that means somebody lost.
A-B, right?
Yeah. Where in a growth mindset, everybody can win. So you think about that. So we have been, talking about salaries with employees. If they talk me into a raise, does that mean they won and I lost? No. If you treat it as a win-win situation, yes, I'm giving you a raise, maybe I'm giving you a promotion, but now with that, I want certain things from you. I want to have a discussion. I think that you could grow in such a way within the role, and I need you to work towards that. So, you don't look at it as a win-lose situation. You try to look at everything, or try to create situations where both sides can win, in the bargaining process.
Yeah, so I took a negotiations class in law school. And one of the only things I remember about from that class decades ago was that if somebody gives you two choices, find a third. And I think that mentality, or that mindset, or that rule suggestion has allowed me to think win-win all the time. It's like, no, let's not make it a binary choice. Let's find a third one that works for both of us. And it's usually because then that third one is, as you just said, a combination of some things that allows us to both win.
And of course, most attorneys out there who have been, at some point in some sort of negotiation, whether it be, a business negotiation or a negotiation in a family law situation or in a mediation in some sort of litigation you're involved in, and that's how they train, the mediators. The mediators are trained to think win-win, because I need to get these two sides to an agreement where they both feel
like they've won.
They've at least won. Maybe if they didn't totally win, they won something. Otherwise, we'll never bridge that divide between the two as they come into the mediation. So it's almost like you should take a mediator's attitude in your day-to-day situations that come up. Don't take the attitude of a high D litigator, thinking that you've got to win and I've got to crush the other side.
Yeah, the other person has to lose, more importantly.
Yeah. That just because ultimately what happens, you may win now, but in the end, you scar the relationship to the point where the relationship is just going to sour.
Yeah, especially in our line of work with our litigation, you see the same repeat players. It can't be just a one-time win. It has to be win for everybody.
Right.
For everybody.
I think about that in terms of our relationship with our vendors.
Yep.
They want to make a sale. I want something. Well, I don't want to pay what you're offering for what I don't like your price. What can we do? What are the terms? Can we negotiate on the edges? How can we make these? Where are the sticking points at? How can we work through the sticking points? We do that all the time. And whenever I get into a situation where a vendor has to win, maybe I just need to go to a different vendor.
Yeah, maybe this isn't a relationship that's going to behoove us both now.
Yeah.
So I think we have 3 more habits, and we'll pick those up.
We're going to pick those up in our last segment, and we'll be right back. I'm Marc Whitehead, a lawyer, entrepreneur, and business coach. Thanks so much for tuning into the Successful Barrister podcast. We have a blast creating it, and I hope you find it helpful. If our chats have sparked your interest, I'd love to hear from you. Shoot me an email at marc@markwhitehead.com. That's Marc spelled with a C. And join the Successful Barrister Newsletter. Even better, let's hop on a call. I'd love to chat about how we can collaborate, share ideas, or just catch up. Diana, we have 3 more habits to talk about. And I will say that the last 3 habits can be a little soft, can be a little mushy.
I can tell you're very uncomfortable.
Yeah, I'm not uncomfortable with them, but I kind of have to reinterpret them
All right.
in a
What do you got?
way that makes sense for me. So habit number 5, first seek to understand and then to be understood, okay? Which can kind of feel a little bit touchy-feely. And so I've had to reinterpret that habit in a way that actually makes sense to me. And the way I have reinterpreted that habit is I need to meet people where they're at.
I like that.
So we talk about this all the time. I manage a team, a law firm of 60 people.
I know where you're going with this now. and
Yes,
I don't know that I like it anymore.
Yeah, you don't like it, but because it does not fit with your fundamental definition of fairness. But here's how it goes. So I have 60 some people in the firm. I counted the other day, I have 12 people that directly report to me, which is, I think, kind of large, but apparently that's just the way it works out. So how do I deal with all of these different people? These people that have different agendas, who have different personality types, who have different ways of communicating. They have different love languages, as we like to call it. How do you deal with all of these people under the way Covey puts it, first seek to understand? I like to kind of feel, where is this person at the moment in their own head? So if I'm talking to a staff member that may be a little unhappy or may be concerned about their role, or they may be confused, or maybe I'm talking to them about their performance and maybe their performance isn't where I need it to be, I first feel that I need to understand where they're at. What's going on in your life? Are you having a bad day today? Are you having problems, in your personal life that might be bleeding over into your professional life? Are you having problems with coworkers? Are you having problems with your supervisor? Are you not understanding what your job is? Do we need to maybe work on training you? So you first seek to figure out where this person is at, where they're coming from, what their problem is, or what's working well. I mean, it can work in both ways, but typically when it gets to me, it's usually there's something going on. Here's where you and I sometimes fundamentally have a problem here, is that you have this innate sense of fairness. This is one of your personal core values.
It is.
And as I've said, I think in your mind, you think fairness means equal or equal treatment.
No. But okay, go ahead.
That's how I perceive it.
Exactly. And that's fair. You and I differ on this.
Yes, we differ.
So obviously there would be different perceptions.
So I view it as I need to meet people where they're at. So I treat people differently sometimes depending on the circumstances. And I don't have a fundamental problem with that, because in my view, I'm trying to meet people where they're at. I'm trying to figure out what's ticking in their mind. So the way I might deal with one person may be different from the way I deal with other people. And then sometimes I've been accused from all sides that this is tantamount to favoritism. I don't view it that way. I'm dealing with the facts as they present me in front of me.
So apparently we're just going to do a bunch of therapy sessions during this podcast.
We're doing a therapy session here.
I will say that while you have 12 direct reports, I am responsible. I'll use those. I did air quotes, listeners, for, it is 60. I think we have 57 full-time and part-time according to our HR system, plus over 10 nearshore, offshore people, probably 15 at this point. And my job is systems, processes, and technology, right? So things glitch when there are one-offs over or here and there. And it's impossible to have scalability, which is what you have charged me with, growing and creating a scalable firm, when you have one-offs here and there, which is what happens when you have, you meet people individually where they're at. What I think the beautiful part of this firm, it is one of our core values is compassion. And so you, as the CEO, as the managing partner, the named partner, you can meet people individually. Your role allows you to meet people where they are individually, whereas my role is to create the same level of accountability within that. So, right, if you're like, Diana, this person's going through a hard time, my job is to find the ways that we can do that while also holding that team member accountable. And that's not always easy, obviously. That sounds like an impossible task the way that I just said it, but thus the tension of the therapy session that we are currently working through.
And the reality is, in my opinion, we're both right.
Oh, absolutely. And because of that tension, I think that it creates the best system where we're at right now for the team members going through their individual things. So I think because we're at that level where we can still see the individual rather than just a KPI or a metric that's missed.
Right.
So what's the second touchy-feely one?
Okay, so habit number 6 is to synergize. And quite frankly, I have this is the way Covey described it. And I'm just going to have to read how Covey said it because it is a little tough for me. But he basically says utilizing all resources available and to make them work towards a successful result. Okay. I have reinterpreted this phrase to basically mean set up effective teams and effectively work as a team.
Mm-hmm.
To me, that's what that means. So I've kind of just shortened this habit down to creating excellent teamwork.
So can I give an example of where I think that you brought this to light to me recently in your own way? So I'm not even giving an operations perspective this time. So we just went through a phone change, a VoIP change in the firm probably about a month ago. And after that, Marc asked 3 of his direct reports, yeah, so if we ever do this again, to which 2 of us said, we're never doing this again. But you asked us, if we ever do this again, how can we do this where it doesn't suck up all of y'all's time? And that to me is what he's talking about with the synergize. Like you had suggested that we bring in an outside vendor to help us with the even though we had extensive support with the vendor that we chose for the phone system, you're like, yeah, but how can we not utilize all of your time?
Yeah.
I think it's teamwork, but it's also leveraging additional resources. Like what don't we have internally that can create a synergy to keep the wheels on the bus?
Right. Well, the question is who's on your team?
Yeah.
And you have to, you're initially what we're talking about when you think of team, you're thinking of people who work for you. It doesn't have to be people that necessarily work for you. They could be vendors that can come in and assist you either on a full-time basis, a project basis, or whatever. In essence, they are part of the larger team that you're bringing into the equation.
And so I think that also with the growth of fractional Cs, fractional, C officers, fractional COOs, fractional CMOs, fractional CFOs, I think that that's how people can still develop synergies in their firm without expending a bunch of cash, maybe.
Yeah, exactly. So I'm going to go back to focusing on the word teamwork because this is kind of, again, how I've reinterpreted this section of Covey's book, which is, the definition of teamwork that I like to use is that teams allow you to perform extremely complex tasks, which is what we are. We're in the legal business. It's a complex system. We can perform extremely complex tasks over and over again on a regular, high quality, high service basis because the tasks are broken down into small bite-sized chunks and assigned to individuals who then can learn and specialize in whatever that particular task is. For example, we have, as simple as we have medical record specialists. That's all they do is get medical records, which may sound simple, but quite frankly, what we've learned it is not.
It's not. It's one of the most important pieces of evidence we need.
So, we don't put that task on a case manager. And then, what does a case manager do? A case manager's first job is customer service, dealing with the clients on a regular basis, managing the workflow, making sure that all the various pieces are done. And quite frankly, a lot of it is managing their attorneys and make sure their attorneys are doing what they're supposed to. And then the attorneys have their function within the team, and what they're good at. And then we have operations people. We have the finance side. We have you on basically operations HR side. So nobody can do all of this stuff, and nobody can develop that expertise, in every aspect. So you need a team so you can break down a complex system and assign people jobs that they can specialize in, then we create good work product. We handle cases, we do them efficiently, we provide good customer service. We win the substantial majority of our cases, we get our clients paid, they're happy. All of that happens because of the synergy that we have created through developing and training and motivating a highly effective team.
I like it. What's your final habit?
So the final habit is sharpening the saw, and that can mean a lot of different things. I think it's continual professional development and training is the way I view it. You can also look at it from a health perspective, which we've done a podcast on health before. And maybe that is the most basic part of sharpening the saw is that,
Got to be in the right mental
you got to be in the
space.
right mental and physical state in order to perform well. The whole analogy of sharpening the saw is, how do you quickly cut down a tree? Well, the first thing you do is you spend 2/3 of your time sharpening the saw. So you want to sharpen yourself personally. You want to get yourself in good physical shape. You want to get yourself in good mental shape. You want to get good sleep. You want to be sharp when you show up. But then beyond that, you want to develop yourself professionally. How can you learn more? There's, you don't know what you don't know. And how do you learn these things that you don't know? Well, you need to get out there and do things to learn. For example, we're in the PILMA Mastermind, where we meet with other like-minded law firms on a regular, I think, basically quarterly basis. And we learn from each other. We go to Atticus and with another group of like-minded lawyers, and we learn from them.
AAJ.
We go to AAJ. We go to TTLA. We expose ourselves. We get out of our
About being a good
cubbyhole.
community.
And I will say I didn't always do that. So just hearkening back in the day, to me, leaving Houston, Texas to go to some convention in Florida or in Chicago or where is it, Denver next year would be unheard of, because at that point I kind of had a pretty closed mindset because quite frankly I was poor and it is expensive.
And you had a young family.
And a young family, and I just didn't want to leave. But once I kind of got out of that mindset and realized, to get the education and the exposure that I need to good business practice, I have to go find it. I have to go get it. It's not going to come to me.
And I think that going back to the whole point of the podcast about being a habit, it's, you went back and you kept going back and now you're dragging your attorneys. We like to go, actually.
I know. I remember the first
You bring
time.
your attorneys.
The first time I went to AAJ, I was lost.
Yeah.
I was utterly lost. What am I doing here? I don't know anybody. There's 3,000 lawyers here. I don't know a soul here. I don't know what's going on. I'm not sure I'm getting anything out of this. But I kept plugging at it, and before you knew it, now I know everybody there. I'm on the what's called the big board. We get a lot of business from it. We get a lot of contacts from it. But yeah, I had to invest. I had to keep going. This started in 2010. We're now 14 years into it.
You made it a habit.
I made it a habit.
Yeah.
Now it's automatic on my calendar. Same thing with Atticus, same thing with PILMA. It just becomes automatic on the calendar, becomes the habit. And we just, we learn. You constantly learn.
And going back to something we talked about earlier about this being part of your legacy, beginning with the end in mind, being a good lawyer, good businessman, you've brought your attorneys. You've invested in your attorneys.
It's not just me going to these things. I'm bringing all my attorneys. I'm bringing you to PILMA last year. I brought my marketing manager, my intake manager to expose them as well. It has to filter down to the rest of the firm. You can't just keep it in your head. So
what's your takeaway, Marc, after having revisited your article, 7 Habits of Highly Effective Lawyers?
You're made up of your atoms and your choices. And, you can't control your atoms, but you can control your choices. And so the habits you develop, the intentional good habits that you develop are your conscious choices to change your behavior in a way that's productive and is positive.
So one of my Peloton coaches, everyone here knows I do the Peloton workouts, said recently, discipline is the strongest form of self-love because you're choosing what you want in the future versus what you want now. And so doing the same thing over and over again, like just, maybe putting off, like if you do workouts, putting off going to happy hour and going to do the workout now because it's better for your health. It's loving yourself a little bit more.
Exactly. And with that, we're going to bring the 7 Habits of Highly Successful Lawyers to a close. We're going to bring this podcast to a close. We want to thank all of our listeners, and we want to thank you for listening to the Successful Barrister podcast, where legal legends are made. I'm Marc.
And I'm Diana.
And together we're the dynamic duo of law. Remember to rate and review us wherever you get your podcast. If you enjoyed this, tell your friends, pass the word. And visit thesuccessfulbarrister.com. I'm sorry, I got the head shake again. It is successfulbarrister.com. No "the" at the end of it. And be sure to visit our sponsor, Marc Whitehead & Associates, a national disability law firm, at disabilitydenials.com. And with that, we're out of here.
Bye.